Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we got a whole bunch of new Final Fantasy spoilers over the weekend and actually on Friday as well. I want to go over all the new spoilers, sweet new combos that are coming to standard, synergies that are coming to standard, all the new mechanics. So let's jump right into it with our first card. This one was spoiled over the weekend. I think this one was on Friday. Um, Shulta. By the way, I'm going to pronounce these cards wrong, so feel free to correct me if you want in the comments below. But I'll do my best, and yeah, so we'll go from there. But uh, Shulta, 6 mana for 3/5. Legendary Cat Druid. At the beginning of your end step, exile target creature you control, then return to the battlefield under its owner's control. Then if it's the first end step, there's an additional end step. So you get to blink a creature. I believe you get to blink a creature twice, which is kind of interesting during your end step if you have creatures with ETB abilities. But this also gives you an extra end step ability, which is quite interesting and unique. And that's kind of what I was curious about this card. If there was anything in standard that could really be used with this card. We've got the Unholy Annex Ritual Chamber, which would be pretty good if you had a demon in play or you just use the Ritual Chamber and you were able to basically draw 2 cards and make your opponent lose 4 life every end step, uh, gain 4 life. That would be pretty powerful. And that kind of blue-black demon shell. Chimil is pretty good as well. At the beginning of your end step, you get to discover 5, so you get to do that twice, which would be pretty powerful. Kind of interesting too with Solkanar, because you can kind of blink it to reset its abilities and also get its abilities twice during her end step. This card is 6 mana to do this ability, so I don't know. Overall, I feel like it probably won't see too much play in standard. It's a pretty fun commander card for sure. Um, but 6 mana is a big ask, I would say, just for something that could be kind of go for the throated during your turn. So not a great exchange if that happens, but kind of interesting. Something to kind of keep in mind as we're maybe looking for more spoilers in this set or future sets, things that have really good end of turn abilities or things that really want to be blinked, or both would be ideal to combo with this card. I'm not sure if there's quite enough good things in standard that would really make this the 6 mana investment worth it, but let me know in the comments below any other kind of combinations with this card that you think might be good. Okay, next up we've got Zell here, which this one was spoiled a little bit before as well, but I never covered it on the channel, so I want to give you my ideas with it. And also we've got more of an understanding of some of the landfall mechanics in this set too, which is a big theme, I think, in red green, it looks like. So this is 3 mana for a 0/3 legendary human monk, and it says you can play an additional land on each of your turns. It gets a power for each land you control, and then at the beginning of your end step, you return a land you control to its owner's hand. Now, there is sort of a landfall theme, again, like I said, with like the birds, it seems like, or in red green overall. So we also have this chocobo that was previewed way before, but has a pretty powerful landfall ability. And there's some other, again, landfall abilities that work well with this. Um, other creatures, because again, essentially lets you play an additional land, but also returns your lands so that you can get more land drops every turn and keep triggering the landfall abilities, which is pretty powerful. And also can pump up its power decently, so it can be a decent attacker as well. But really works well with the landfall strategies and also just lands that come into play that trigger abilities such as conduit pylons, things that like the surveil lands, any of the surveil lands, or the ping lands, the desert lands from Outlaws. Those could be pretty good to just use every turn and trigger your landfall abilities, ping your opponent every turn. So maybe there's something there. Definitely would be an important piece, it seems like, of the landfall strategy if that is a decent deck. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other cards and some of the new lands that we're also getting in this set later in the review. So let's go to the next card, which is Zenos, and this is 5 mana for 4/4. It says, "My first friend. When Zenos enters, choose a creature an opponent controls until end of turn. Creatures other than it and the chosen creature get -2/-2. So could potentially wipe the board if your opponent has a bunch of tokens. Let's say they have like two twos and a 3/3. You just target the 3/3, right, and then it would kill the other two twos. So that could be fine because if the -2/-2 isn't going to kill that creature anyways, it kind of doesn't matter. But if they did have just say all creatures that could be killed with it, then that's kind of a downside. However, next line of text says when the chosen creature leaves the battlefield, you transform it. Transforms into an 8/8 with flying, and then when you transform it, you choose an opponent, and the chosen player loses the game, you win the game. So that's only relevant for multiplayer formats. Kind of odd this is in the main set, not in a commander product, but um, here we are. It does turn into a dragon, which could be relevant, I suppose. But I feel like the way you want to use this card is like with a bunch of blink effects. It seems like because what you could do if you want to reset its first ability, right, to give everything -2/-2, you could blink it and have it come back in and maybe wipe the board, supposedly with that effect or all but one creature. And if you want to trigger its flip ability, you could also say if you had a getaway glamour, you could just target that one creature that you chose. That would leave the battlefield, right? Because it's blinked. Then you'd flip over to an 8/8 flyer. So, overall, this card power level doesn't seem that high, but it's kind of interesting, I would say, with blink effects for sure. If it does come into the play, sweeps most of your opponent's creatures, and then turns into an 8/8 flyer for 5 mana, that's a pretty good deal, I would say. But it has to be maybe against a specific deck, and you kind of have to have a way to remove your opponent's creatures to flip it. So it does require some hoops and maybe more of a sideboard card overall. But kind of interesting, at least just to think about, and maybe just more of a commander card overall. Okay, so let's get into the new cards that were spoiled on Saturday too. So this is Furion, the Wild Rose Warrior. 3 mana for a 3/3 legendary human rebel warrior. Equipped creatures you control have haste. Whenever a non-token equipment you control enters, create a token that's a copy of it. Except it has its equipped abilities cost 2 less to activate. Sacrifice it at the um, beginning of next upkeep. Oh, upkeep. Okay. I misread this actually. The first time I read it, I thought it was end of your turn. The next upkeep. So that would be your opponent's upkeep, though, I believe, right? I mean, I don't know if it matters too much, but just something to kind of keep in mind. How do we use this card? Well, the best equipment in standard is the Corey Steel Cutter. If you're not familiar with that, you kind of know what that does, I'm sure. If you play any standard, this could give you 2 copies of that, which could be kind of interesting if you played that, and then you played another spell, you get more monks that turn. That could be interesting. I think this is better used with some of the other equipment, and we're actually gonna get some. I mean, equipment seems like red, white. The Boros seems like the equipment theme in this set. So in the whole Final Fantasy set, something to kind of keep in mind with other cards, and we'll talk about some of the other equipment spell matters cards later. But this one seems pretty good with when you want like equipments that have come into play abilities. Um, like chainsaw is pretty cool with this because then you get 2 copies of chainsaw. You can deal 6 damage to a creature or kill 2 of your opponent's creatures. Then you don't really care too much of the original copy gets sacrificed because it's already done what it's needed to do. Cryptic Coat could be kind of interesting. You get an initial copy, you get another 2/2, and then Cryptic Coat, you can bounce it back to your hand, cast it again, and kind of get this trigger going again. Make a bunch of 2/2s. Perhaps that could be useful. Lotus Ring, I thought would be interesting with the reduce the cost of it by 2, because then the additional one would come into play. Its equip would cost 1 now, and then you could use it to um, equip to one of your creatures, sacrifice it for 3 mana, and then pay only 1 to equip it to the next one, sacrifice it for 3 mana, so you could maybe generate a ton of mana that way. I don't know. Seems a little janky, perhaps, but something to kind of keep in mind. Definitely a cool card, and as more equipments get revealed, kind of had to take this card into context of that. But it seems like it already works pretty well with Chainsaw, as well as some other equipment that there's like a bunch of 4 Mirrodin equipment that I didn't include here too. That could be interesting as well. Get additional copies of those 2/2s as well. So something to kind of keep in mind with this guy. All right, so let's move on to Terra here, which is a 3 mana 4/2, and when it enters, you mill 5. Put up to 1 enchantment card milled this way into your hand. So milling 5 for 3 mana is actually decent with a body on it, just on its own. This is kind of an interesting card. Um, it has trance for 6 mana to exile it, then return it to the battlefield transformed. And the backside is a saga, which the first ability is create a token copy that's a copy of a non-legendary enchantment you control. It gains haste. If it's a saga, you put 3 lore counters on it and sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. That's kind of interesting. Let's see. You would always sacrifice it, I believe, even if it's not a saga. Is that correct? I think so. And then on lore counter 4, it you get 10 mana basically, and this becomes a 6/6 flyer. So there's some interesting stuff you could do with this when you flip it. The one was the mesmerizing dose, which lets you proliferate because when you flip it, if you have a dose out, on the battlefield. You flip this, then you can create a copy of the dose, which will let you proliferate, put another counter on the Esper Terra, and then another dose comes into play. You put another, uh, you proliferate again, put another dose on one of your opponent's creatures, or could be one of your creatures, I believe, and then just proliferate again. Then you can get to the last ability right away. Basically, you get to get 10 mana, which you could use on, I don't know, Progenitus, something like that. Just something interesting. I don't know, kind of an interesting interaction. Not sure if that'll actually be that great, but it is something you could do. It would also let you proliferate like 4 times, so or 3 times, I suppose, which could be useful for other counter strategies. But overall, I feel like this card, the front half, just the 3 mana 4/2 mills and gets an enchantment, is pretty good. Kind of cool with like Fear of Missing Out enchantment creatures, because you could get those, and like Delirium strategies, because it fills up your graveyard pretty well. So could turn on Delirium. Kind of cute too with the Overlord of Baelmark, because Overlord of the Baelmark, you could impend it to find the Terra, and then you could play a Terra to maybe find another Overlord, and then play another Overlord to get back the Terra if it dies, and kind of just keep milling through your deck that way. Something like that could be interesting. I don't know. This card seems efficient in what it's doing, and it's, I think, a pretty good enabler for like kind of finding a key enchantment, filling up your graveyard at the same time. And if your deck wants to do both of those, then I think this card's quite good. So seems like a cool one. Definitely one to keep in mind with deck building. All right, let's move on to Kefka, Court Mage, which is 5 mana for 4/5, and when it enters or attacks, each player discards a card. Then you draw a card for each card type among cards discarded this way. 8 mana, each opponent sacrifices a permanent of their choice, and then transform it, activate as a sorcery. It becomes a 5/7 flying. Whenever an opponent loses life during your turn, you draw that many cards. So this card has a lot of text on it, as many of these cards do. It doesn't seem that great to me. It seems like interesting that you get to, I mean, you can use it as a discard outlet yourself, because it says each player discards a card to draw some cards, so you could kind of use it and draw a discard. But 5 mana is just like, I don't know if you really want to have that effect for 5 mana. It could be interesting if you had like Roaming Throne and you named Human, or Wizard with Roaming Throne. Wizard is a relevant creature type, as we'll see later in the review, and Human also as well. But this feels like the mana requirements for this are a little high. Again, if you did double the trigger, it could be kind of sweet, to make your opponent discard 2 cards. You could draw a bunch of cards if there's a bunch of different types. And it does do it whenever it attacks too. So I don't know. Maybe this finds a home. It does go infinite. The back half goes infinite with Niv Mizzet, which says Niv Mizzet is whenever you draw a card, does 1 damage to any target. And then it says whenever an opponent loses life, you draw that many cards. So those two go infinite with each other. Again, this is very expensive to do. 6 mana for the dragon, 8 mana to flip this thing. Um, but maybe there's some ways to do this in Commander that are doable for sure. So I think there's another Nip Mizzet that has the same ability too. Maybe I don't know if there's any other cards that have that same ability that would go infinite with this, but that was the one card I could think of. Yeah, overall, I don't know. I don't see this seeing too much play. I'm not too excited about it, but definitely an interesting effect. Not one we've kind of seen a lot of. Yeah, let me know in the comments below if there's anything I'm missing with this one. Okay, let's move on to another equipment dude. We got Gilgamesh, Master at Arms, which is 6 mana for a 6/6 human samurai. And when it enters or attacks, look at the top 6 cards in your library. You can put any number of equipment cards from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest at the bottom of your library. And when you put one or more onto the battlefield this way, you can attach one of them to a samurai. And it itself is a samurai, so mostly probably attaching it to it, or if you do have other samurais or changelings, things like that, you could attach them. But really, kind of what you want to hit off this is really expensive equipment, because then you can get a bunch of free stuff put into play. And again, there's kind of like 4 Mirrodin equipments that we talked about before. Of course, Shield Cutter, um, Chainsaw could be decent. But the kind of 2 ones that I was looking at in Standard, the Dragon Wing Glider and also the dissection tools, are both pretty good, decent on their own, but would be really good hits off of this, because you could either equip them directly to Gilgamesh or just have them in play as sort of 4/4 creatures, with flying haste or death touch lifelink, which is a pretty good deal if you're getting that off Gilgamesh. Say if you had like half your deck filled with equipment, you hit like 3 equipments, that would be a pretty powerful swing. Um, but I don't know, 6 mana is a lot. Maybe there's ways to kind of sneak this guy into play that could be useful, but you do have to have quite a few equipments in your deck. And again, we'll have to see. I think really have to see how this whole set flushes out with the equipment theme and what kind of equipments we have. There are some sort of like living weapon equipments as well that are kind of have attached. A creature comes into play attached to them, so you can kind of fill out your deck with those with Gilgamesh as well. But yeah, again, I think this is one of those cards where like really have to see the whole set to see just how good it is. But with what we already have, it seems okay, but a bit expensive, I would say. All right, next up, we've got Kane, the Traitorous Dragoon. This is a cool one. 3 mana for a 2/4 human knight, and during your turn, it has flying, and when it deals combat damage to a player, that player gains control of it. If they do, you draw that many cards, create that many tap treasure tokens, and then lose that much life. So definitely an interesting, unique ability. I don't know. This card seems kind of interesting and actually good in some situations. If you have pump spells, particularly like Titanic Growth, red and green have a lot of pump spells. You pump this, say you hit them for 6, you create 6 treasure tokens. You would lose 6 life, which would be kind of a downside, but you would draw 6 cards. So that would be pretty good. If you had pump spells in your deck and your opponent didn't, and you gave them this card, you could, with the card advantage and mana advantage you generated from it, could be worth it. The other thing that you can do with this is sort of just like, again, blink spells would be pretty good. Let's say you hit them for 2, draw 2, make 2 treasures, lose 2, give it to them, and then you just parting gust it, blink it, and it comes back on to your side. So you could do some cute stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe there's too many hoops to jump through with this thing, but certainly an interesting one and one to consider. You know, if they have other efficient blink spells or pretty good pump spells, I think those are the kind of the 2 ways I could think of using this. Okay, let's move on to the next one here, Barts and Boko, which is a human bird, 5 mana for a 4/3, and it's got affinity for birds. And when it enters, each other bird you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. So basically, if you have a bunch of birds out, it's other birds, so it doesn't count its own power. But if you have a bunch of birds out, you'll probably kill one of your opponent's creatures with all of them if you have good enough power. So kind of a Necrotal kind of card comes into play, kills one of your opponent's creatures. Also, can be the cost can be reduced, which is pretty cool. In standard, we don't have a lot of like green birds, but there are some, and we'll talk about that actually in the next slide. In this set, the Chocobo theme seems to be birds, green birds. We do have like white and blue birds from Bloomborough and other sets, like the Jackdaw Savior, Aven Interrupter, Mockingbird, Empyrean Eagle. Those aren't bad, and cheap ones are usually good because you want with affinity. Kind of, there are some one-drop birds as well, like Mockingbird, but some white one-drop birds that could help reduce the cost of this. So a decent card if you're kind of going in all in on birds. Obviously, let's say birds one more time. So yeah, this could be decent. I don't know if there is a bird deck, and the next card I think will maybe give us some more context with that. This one I think is actually just a good card overall. A traveling chocobo, which is 3 mana for the 3/2 bird. You can look at the top card of your library, play lands, and cast bird spells from the top card of your library. And if a land or bird you control enters the battlefield, causing a triggered ability, if a permanent control trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So interesting effect, and actually a pretty powerful effect on this. A vulnerable body as having 2 toughness and dying to cut down stats is not great, but if you can sort of trigger this ability a couple times, or getting additional triggers from abilities, or getting some card advantage, that's I think this card's quite powerful. So interesting again with like the desert lands that ping your opponent, it would trigger twice, or even if you say you had an impact tremors, you play this, it would trigger the impact tremors twice because a bird itself would be triggering an ability of a permanent. Again, we've got the Saz Chocobo, which would like the landfall abilities would all trigger an additional time because it would be a land coming into play, trigger an ability of a creature or a permanent you control. So I don't know, it seems decent. I think this would definitely see play in like a heavy bird deck. So maybe this card and the last card would certainly go together decently. But maybe there's other like landfall synergies in general that you just want to be using this with, and maybe even in like older formats. I was thinking like Ballot could be kind of cool, doubling those triggers. I don't know if that's good enough, but it does cast lands off the top of your deck, so maybe in like a Valakut deck, this card could work as well. But yeah, let me know what you think about this card. Love chocobos and the flavor, so definitely a sweet one. All right, next up we've got Cloud. So the iconic Cloud, 2 mana for a 2/1, and when it enters, search your library for an equipment, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. As long as it's equipped, if an ability of Cloud or an equipment attached to it triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Again, like the best equipment that we have in standard is the Quarry Steel Cutter. So you could use this to define that in like a red, white prowess deck, something like that. Could be decent. And then, just basically play like 8 copies of Quarry Steel Cutter. I mean, not bad, right? Um, and then if you did equip the Quarry Steel Cutter to Cloud, it would trigger additional times. You could make additional monks. It's a little awkward because you have to actually equip it, and then may not want to equip monks with it, but you know, seems fine. The card doesn't need any more help to be good, but you know, whatever. This is a very good, efficient tutor though for equipment. Again, they kind of like teased in the video yesterday too that there was another really good equipment that works with him. So we'll have to see what that ends up being. But also we have the Aether Spark, which I thought could be decent with this. A while back on the channel I made, or not too long ago, but a few months ago, I guess, I made an Aether Spark deck, which tried to get to the -10 and use the 10 mana to just win the game with the Aether Spark. Which was pretty cool, and this card would definitely see play in that deck. I mean, this is like a really efficient way to use the Aether Spark because if you play this on 2 and then you play Aether Spark on turn 4, or let's say you had Landwar Elves in this Aether Spark on turn 3, and then you equip Aether Spark to Cloud. For example, you attack for 3. Aether Spark is now at 4 loyalty. You hit them for 3, and then it triggers the Aether Spark's ability twice to give it extra loyalty. So it would go up to 11, I believe. 3 plus 3 is 6, and plus 5 is 11. And then the next turn, you could use the -10. So definitely an efficient way to use the Aether Spark and try to get to its -10 ability pretty quickly with Cloud, and a way of tutoring the Aether Spark itself. So maybe you just you only play one Aether Spark in this deck, as if you have enough tutors for it, you don't need necessarily more than 1 or 2. So yeah, could be used in that way. And again, we'll see what other equipment stuff. But it definitely seems like they are pushing. They always seem to push the equipment theme in some of the sets, and it's usually not very good. But maybe this set is actually good enough. I mean, being able to tutor an equipment and give you a body and give you double triggers on things is good. There are other like swords in standard and older formats that this could be pretty good with. And let me know in the comments below if there's any other equipment that you think that would be good targets for Cloud. But yeah, those are my ideas for Cloud. Okay, next up, Reprint Central. We got Dark Confidant back in standard. This card is sweet, obviously. 2 mana for a 2/1 at the beginning of your upkeep. Reveal the top card. Put it into your hand to lose life equal to its mana value. So definitely a strong card and has been historically. I do think it will see some play. I think people are speculating it's not good enough, and maybe that's right. I don't know, but I mean, just 2 mana to draw an extra card every turn is quite good, and we are getting some, like, Cecil here, which actually somewhat incentivizes you to lose life. The last ride, you can crew the last ride and kind of give it more power, essentially, by losing life. There's a lot of really efficient black removal cards, Cut Down, Go for Throat, and discard, like Duress and Deep Cavern Bat in Standard right now that just, if you load up your deck with really low-cost black efficient cards, um, this card's pretty good. So I don't know. We'll see if it sees any play or not. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I think it's definitely something to consider when you're building any sort of low to the ground black deck, or a deck that you want to potentially lose life with. And maybe there's something like that. Okay, next up we have got the Aerith Gainsborough. Oh, one more thing about Dark Confidant. It is a wizard too, which could matter. I just realized that as there's another wizard card coming next. Okay, Aerith. Let's talk about Aerith. 3 mana for a 2/2. Human Cleric, a lifelink. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Aerith. And then when she dies, put X +1/+1 counters on each legendary creature you control. X is the number of +1/+1 counters. If you played Final Fantasy VII, that was like the one Final Fantasy game I played like all the way through, and I remember Aerith dying and being incredibly sad. So it's kind of funny that they put a death ability on here. Funny shout out to the story. Spoilers, sorry for anyone who hasn't played the game, but in this context of Magic, this card seems decent, especially with like life gain strategies, obviously, but also like a legendary theme. And there are some cards that kind of work with both, like Amalia, Elias Elcor, the Linden. All of those are legends that could get pumped when this creature dies, but also pumps up the Aerith because he wants life gain triggers, and so yeah, kind of work together. We also have a new land here that I just wanted to point out. Kind of thought could go in the same deck. Maybe mana requirements wouldn't work out here, but it does gain you 2 life when it comes to play. It comes to play untapped and taps for colorless. It's also a town, which could be a relevant land type. So I don't know. As we're thinking about life gain strategies, we are getting a new land that works pretty well with them as well. So let's go to Tifa, also from Final Fantasy VII. Pretty sweet card here. Probably one of the strongest cards so far, I would say, spoiled, in my opinion. 2 mana for a 1/2. Legendary human monk with trample, landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, double Tifa's power until end of turn. So doubling its power for a landfall ability is quite powerful. Because you don't have to cast any spells to double its power. So all you really have to do is get its power up to 5, and then play 2 lands, and its power is 20. Not too hard, actually. In standard, you can kill them on turn 3 with this. If you play this on turn 2, and then you go Titanic Growth, power is 5. Fable Passage, power is 10. Crack It, power is 20. And there's other cards besides Fable Passage. There's other fetch lands in standard. Obviously, in older formats, there's fetch lands galore. So, and pump spells galore as well. You could just have 2 giant growths, get its power up to 7, like +3, +3, +3, +3. Red has a bunch of pump spells as well. There's no shortage of pump spells that can get this power and get its power up to 5 or greater by turn 3. So all you'd have to do is add a fetch land to that, and that's your entire opponent's life total. Now, this card does die to a lot of things. Like, it's not super broken. If it had like hexproof or something, this card would be nuts. But it does die to all the shock effects, cut downs, and almost basically every removal I can think of in standard. So it certainly answers to it, but it certainly, if you don't have an answer to it, it will kill you very quickly if you build your deck around it. So definitely an exciting one. Maybe something I'll try out on the channel and build around. But again, landfall strategies too, as we've been talking about some landfall synergies here. This could work in that red-green landfall deck pretty well as well. So Tifa, I think, pretty strong card. Okay, next up we've got Kuja, which is a 4-mana 3/4, and at the beginning of your end step, you create a tap 0/1 black wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then if you control 4 more wizards, it itself is a wizard. This is the card I was referring to with all the wizard synergies. Dark Confidant is wizard. I could play that in this deck. I was trying to think of like what are the red black wizards. I couldn't think of too many great ones, but great ones. Didn't mean to say that. Dark Confidant is a wizard, so that could go in this deck. And then if a wizard you control would deal damage to a permanent or player deals double that damage. So the kind of pinging effect of all these little tokens will double. Being a 4/6 is pretty sweet. So this attacks. It itself is a wizard, so it attacks for essentially 8 damage, which is strong. So this card seems pretty decent to me. Makes tokens every turn, and then it can double damage, and then can ping your opponent. Um, Note the tokens are tapped, so you can't necessarily just like jump every turn with them, but you do get extra tokens for token strategies or things like that. But I think you want to kind of flip this guy as soon as possible. Like if you have 2 wizards out, you play this, you get another wizard, flips right away. And then, sorry. Then if you control your end step, yeah, okay. So you don't flip it right away. You flip it during your end step, and then say you had a mage, or you have slick shot show off, it'll double the power the next turn. Or if you play Vishnu Pyromancer, that wizard will do 4 damage. So if there is like a red black or red black blue, like all the otters, the blue red otters are all kind of wizards too. So there's a lot of wizards available in Magic, and even this next card is a wizard. So um, definitely would obviously want to play this in a wizard deck, and I think this card could be decent. So we'll see. All right, next up, again we got Vivy, the wizard here, which seems pretty strong. Could play it in the same deck as the last card. This is 3 mana for 0/3. It has an ability of 0 mana to add X mana of any combination of blue or red to your mana pool where it's power, but you can only do it during your turn only once each turn. And when you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and deals 1 damage to each opponent. Now, this card to me seems really strong. It can add a bunch of extra mana. It can also get pretty big pretty quickly, and it pings your opponent. So it's kind of like double pumping itself almost, or double in damage. So imagine if you play this, and then the next turn you just like play Op, Sleight of Hand, Monstrous Rage. Now its power is what, 6, and then you go 0, like add 6 mana, play like I don't know, stock up, something like that. Ping them again, attack for a ton of damage. You could even use like Splash Portal to like reset its ability. So that could be interesting if you kind of like go off and combo off with this card. But excuse me, it doesn't take too much to really kind of kill your opponent, I feel like, with this. If you untap with it, it does again kind of die to a lot of stuff. Cut down, especially not great if you just play this and dies. But um, once you get a few counters on it, it won't die to cut down anymore or to other kind of burn spells as easily. So I can see this card kind of getting out of hand pretty quickly. And there's already, we already have like blue red is probably like the Core Steel Cutter deck is probably the best deck in standard, or one of the best decks. And this card, I think, this kind of slots right into that deck with all the cantrips it's doing already. Um, so I don't know. I think this card's strong. And has some even combo potential to kind of like just play a bunch of cantrips, kill your opponent in one shot with it. So because it adds a ton of mana if you kind of gets you all your mana back if you're just casting 1 mana spells, or gives you kind of like rituals your mana with pump spells. Okay, let's move on to the next card. Absolute Virtue. This is an interesting one. 8 mana for an 8/8. And the spell can't be countered and has flying, and you have protection from each of your opponents. So basically, you can't be dealt damage or enchanted or targeted by anything controlled by your opponent. You're kind of invincible, basically. Um, and we already have like what's a big angel? The Eternal Dawn angel, which says you can't lose the game. This is very similar to that. This costs another mana, but it is an 8/8, so it kind of closes the game a little quicker. It also can't be countered, which could be relevant in like a counter war, I guess. Um, but again, I think the best way to use this is like Parination to get it back, give it hexproof, give it indestructible. Now you just can't lose the game, basically. To some decks, unless they had like a sweeper that exiles or targets it. You can still itself be targeted. So by itself, this creature is just like not that great because it dies to just like go for the throat or a lot of removal spells. Um, but if you get this out against like a burn deck, then you're probably just going to win the game. So could be reanimated in other ways against uh, burn decks, things like that. I could see this maybe in a sideboard in a reanimator deck against a burn deck, something like that. But if you're gonna use it in the main deck, I think kind of Parination is probably the best thing you're gonna want to do with this thing. Um, yeah, I think that's basically enough to talk about this. Unless there's some other ways you can think of using it. The ability is unique, but it's not like necessarily better than. It basically says you can't lose the game on it, but it itself can be targeted. So interesting card. Okay, let's go to a summon card. So these summons are both sagas and creatures and enchantments, and this is 9 mana, 9 colors mana for a 9/9 flying. And then in the first 2 chapters, you destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. Then you draw 2 cards, and then it deals damage equal to the total mana value of other permanents you control to each opponent. So could kill your opponent pretty quickly with this thing if you're hitting them for 9 and then doing a bunch of damage. Imagine this would end the game. How do we want to use this? I mean, I think reanimating it is probably the best way to kind of get into play here with like Coiling Rebirth. I thought would be kind of fun if you get an additional copy of it. It's not legendary, so this works in that regard. Um, so you get 2 copies. One would be a 1/1, but you're mostly using this for its saga abilities, right? So then you would destroy up to 2 permanents the first 2 turns. So you could destroy like 4 permanents and draw 4 cards, and then deal damage. I'm not 100% sure if like in the last ability they would see each other and they would both have a mana cost of 9. I don't know. Someone can let me know in the comments below if that's true with Coiling Rebirth. But seems like a pretty decent target. Vat Emergence is an interesting one too with these Saga creatures because it brings back the creature and then it proliferates. So you get the first two modes right away. If you're trying to just get to the last mode, it'll get you there a turn quicker and also would destroy two permanents potentially. So that could be another pretty cool way to reanimate this thing and get into play. But seems pretty strong once you get it there, and can do a lot of damage to your opponent. Probably end the game pretty quickly. But the ways to kind of sneak it in, we'll talk about another one that looks decent as well later on in the spoilers. But those are kind of some interesting ways I thought to reanimate summon Bahama. All right, next up is Jill, which is 3 mana for a 2/2. When it enters, return up to one other target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. 5 mana, tap to exile it, and then you flip it over into a 4/5 with the first two modes of target creature can't be blocked, and then Cold Snap, tap all lands your opponent's control. And then it flips back into its first mode, which again then would be able to bounce a permanent. This card seems not great. It seems okay. And I'm just wondering, like, would we just play this in like self bounce strategies? It's kind of cool that you can either bounce your opponent's permanents or your own, get your home plus nightmare back, play it again, Storm Chaser's Talent, play it again. All those enchantments that you're playing again with Jill, and all the other cards in those self bounce strategies. So maybe this card would see play there. It is, 3 mana, so it's a little clunkier, more expensive than the other options you typically to bounce your own stuff, but it does have some flexibility and this ability to kind of create a 4/5, which is kind of unblockable. Like you could target itself, could hit them for 4, and then sort of tap your opponent's lands down. So there's some extra value hidden in there, and then kind of get another bounce. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it did see some play in maybe the blue black or Esper Pixie kind of decks. But that's kind of the only home I could really see this in standard. Okay, let's move on to another pretty sweet reanimation target. This is Ardan, which is 8 mana for a 4/4 Elder Human Noble, and it says demons you control have menace, lifelink, and haste. And at the beginning of combat, you turn exile up to one target creature card from a graveyard. So this could target your opponent's graveyard or your own. If you exile a card this way, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 5/5 black demon. Pretty cool card to reanimate. Again, I think this you're definitely going to see this in. If you do see it in standard, it will be in a reanimation strategy. But again, you can target your opponent's graveyard. But things like the threefold Thunderhulk, if you can imagine, you have that and this in your graveyard. You zombify back the Ardan. Then during your combat, you get the Thunderhulk back. It becomes a 5/5, but it also comes into play with three +1/+1 counters on it. So it's essentially an 8/8. You get 8 tokens. You attack with it because it has haste. You get more tokens. Has lifelink and menace as well, because it's a demon. You're probably just winning the game that way. With things like kind of like fear of missing out, even reanimating fear of missing out, making it a 5/5 black demon is kind of cool, because it attacks right away. Then you could get an additional combat step, and then you could get its Star Scourge ability again to reanimate something else from your opponent or your own graveyard. So definitely a very powerful ability. It is again could just die to removal. It doesn't have any like protection itself. If your opponent like is holding up, go for the throat, then zombifying this back is pretty bad. But the ability to kind of like do something very powerful this turn this thing comes into play is certainly there. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Let me know if there's any other cool uh, targets that you can think of for this in the graveyard that would be um, useful. But I think this card can definitely see some play in reanimation strategies, and Fear of Missing Out is kind of cool because you'd probably play that in a reanimation strategy itself, but also would be a good target for it. Okay, let's move on to Balthier and Fran, which is 3 mana for a 4/3. The human rabbit. It has reach. Vehicles you control get +1/+1, have vigilance and reach. And when a vehicle crewed by it attacks, if it's a first combat phase, you get, or you can pay 3 mana, and then if you do after this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So note that it doesn't say you untap the creature, but it does give the creature or the vehicle's vigilance, so it's not too much of a problem. I think the way you want to use this card is with like vehicles that add additional mana, like the Lumbering World Wagon or the Cultivator's Caravan, um, because it requires quite a bit of mana. Like you kind of want to just like play this and have 6 mana available. So you play this and then have 3 mana to give it to crew and then get an additional combat step. Lumbering World Wagon especially is pretty cool because each time it attacks, you get an additional land. So if you played this, I played, say, for example, World Wagon, and then you had 6 mana up, you played this crew attack, get an additional combat step, you could just kill your opponent with the World Wagon if it has enough power there. So yeah, and then again, like Cultivator's Caravan, it does give it vigilance, so you could use it to tap for the extra mana to pay for the ability to get an extra combat step. Um, Although, wait, I just realized that doesn't quite work because then during the second combat step, it would be tapped. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Never mind. Maybe that doesn't work so well. Anyways, ignore what I just said. But regardless, I do think you want vehicles that give you extra mana because you kind of want 6 mana for this to actually work. So, anyways, pretty good with World Wagon. Otherwise, I don't know. Vehicles just haven't really taken off in standard. Probably not that going to see much play, but maybe we'll get some cool vehicles in the future or in the set. We'll see. All right, next up we've got Sepharoth. This card I think is quite strong, probably one of the stronger cards in the set that's been revealed so far. And when it enters or attacks, you can sacrifice another creature if you do draw a card. And whenever another creature dies, it pings your opponent and you gain a life. If this is the fourth time it resolves, you flip it over, and then when it transforms, you get an emblem that says the same thing. It basically, whenever a creature dies, ping your opponent, gain a life. It's a 5/5 flyer, and when it attacks, you can sacrifice any number of creatures and then draw that many cards. So this card is a house, I think. It comes into play. You can get a card right back from it if you have any token strategies like from Voice of the Victory, Mobilize cards. You can kind of sacrifice those right away, get an additional card back, and ping your opponent. Um, and then with cards like Bart, then you can kind of like sacrifice your whole board. It works really well with the Bart, like Forsaken Miner kind of combo where you want to have something that sacrifices the Forsaken Miner, but then you want something that um, commits a crime. And this does commit a crime because it says target on it. So then you can just pay another black to get it back, sacrifice it again, ping your opponent, pay another black, get it back again. So you could flip this pretty quickly with those 3 cards in play, and then get that emblem and get a 5/5 and draw a bunch of cards. So just seems like a pretty sweet card overall, pretty powerful, um, and pretty good with mobilize as well. So seems like it's. I would say this is definitely going to see some play in a aristocrat style deck, and definitely a big boon to those kind of style decks. Okay, let's go to the next one, which is this one is pretty cool too. Summon Primal Odin, 6 mana, 5/3. So again, this is a saga creature. Comes into play, you destroy a creature an opponent controls. Chapter 2 is it gets whenever the creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. Pretty powerful. And then draw 2 cards, each player loses 2 life. So, I'm thinking of this card, like how can we use this? Kind of cute with Abuelos, maybe, if you can get that back, because if you Abuelos this on turn 4, for example, you get to destroy one of your opponent's creatures, maybe even a flying blocker. And the next turn you have a 1/1 flyer that if it hits your opponent, they die. They lose the game. So um, giving it evasion is good, and being able to get it in for cheap is also pretty good. So maybe that could be an interesting strategy. If you're just playing this fairly, like there are lots of ways to kind of give it evasion. Give it trample with something, monstrous rage, or even like some lands that can give it evasion. So I think that could be good. It has 3 toughness and dies to go for the throat and a lot of removal. So I don't know how great that is, but it does give you some value when it comes into play. Again, Vat Emergence could be kind of interesting if you're just trying to get to the second mode. Maybe give it haste or something like that and kill your opponent with it in one turn. Um, I don't know. Something like that could be an interesting strategy. Might just be too expensive for standard. I'm not sure. But something I will be maybe brewing around on this channel, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, next up we got Cleve, which is 6 mana for 5/5. It enters, you can discard your hand and draw cards equal to your devotion to red. 6 mana to flip it over. It becomes a 9/9, and it fights something when it comes into play, and then it adds additional mana the next couple turns, and then flips back, which then lets you again discard your hand, draw cards. So pretty powerful but very expensive abilities, or cost and ability. In standard, we do have like Count on Luck. There could be some other ways to get your devotion up, but I feel like 6 mana is a big ask in standard. Like, you're gonna probably be dead by the time you try to get this off. But it can draw a lot of cards. I don't know. Could be okay maybe in like a big red deck, a more controlling red deck. We could see that play. But I really think maybe in Pioneer with like Nykthos, this could be cool in a devotion to red deck, because Nykthos gives you the mana for it and the flipping ability of it. So um, it is cool too. You get some additional mana when it flips back, and you get the cards back. So this card is very powerful for sure in what it's doing. Can draw a lot of cards, and control the board decently with its fight ability, but is very expensive. And I think without Nykthos, I don't know. I just don't quite see it seeing play in a format that doesn't have Nykthos with the devotion strategy. But yeah, interesting card for sure. Okay, next up, we've got the summon Grimmore. So again, this is sort of another equipment that has like job select. Wouldn't know what that means. It comes into play with a 1/1 colorless attached to it. So basically, you're like, you're selecting a shaman as its job. Because it comes into play as a shaman, and it has whenever the creature uh, attacks, you can put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield directly. And if it's an enchantment, it enters tapped and attacking. And you can equip it for 3, which is kind of cool. So, um, even if they kill your shaman token, you could equip it to something else and get the ability. To get it right away, you kind of want it to have haste. Something like the Frost Cliff Siege would be pretty good to give it haste and trample, and then get the ability right away. And then if you're putting something into play, again, the summon, I don't know how to pronounce it, Bahamut, I believe, would come into play tapped and attacking, which is pretty strong. Hit them for 9, or Overlords would come into play tapped and attacking, or maybe just putting Progenitus into play. I don't know, something like that. This definitely seems like kind of a card I will build around and try to make it work as a way to sneak things into play. But in terms of how competitive it is, I don't know. It doesn't seem that competitive. 4 mana, and you have to attack, and it gives you just a 1/1. Maybe it's better than I'm thinking because it is an equipment, but definitely requires some setup to have something decent in your hand that you really want to sneak into play as well. Um, but yeah, definitely a really cool and potentially quite powerful effect. Okay, next up we've got Lightning, Army of One. And it's funny because you probably want an army of more than just this, given its ability. And it also doesn't have haste, which is kind of weird for being called Lightning. But 3 mana for a 3/2, first strike, trample, lifelink. Good set of abilities, and it has stagger whenever it deals combat damage to a player until the next turn. If a source would deal damage to that player, or a permanent that player controls, it deals double that damage instead. So very interesting card on its own. Again, you kind of want other creatures and play this on its own for this ability to be decent, because it has first strike. So when you hit them with first strike, then if your creatures have regular strike, that damage will be doubled. It also has trample, which gives it a better chance of dealing combat damage to the player during first strike. Lifelink is a nice addition too. The stat line, kind of not great, because 2 toughness dies to shock, and just basically every removal being a 3/2, that's the cut down. So that's definitely a downside to it. But if you do get to hit with this, its ability is very powerful. Um, so what I was thinking about with this card too is like, what if you give itself double strike? If you with like uh, twice the rage with the 2-headed hunter here, for example, the first one would deal 3 damage, and then during regular strike it would deal 6, I believe. And then I believe you would get this ability stagger twice because you've done combat damage twice to your opponent, which means any other spell or something or damage you do that turn would deal double that damage. Tell me if that's wrong. But say you did give it double strike, you hit them for 3, and then the next strike would deal 6, right? That's 9, and then you played Bolt Wave, and that would do 4 damage. 4 times 3 would be 12 additional damage, and 12 plus 9 is more than 20. So that would kill them, right? I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong about that math and how that ability stacks, but I think that works. You'd also gain quite a lot of life. So this card is certainly powerful and very kind of vulnerable, but definitely powerful one. Kind of reminds me of Tifa. It can do very powerful things, but can be removed very easily as well. So we'll see how it goes. If they don't have removal, it certainly can take over the board, and actually it's a decent blocker the turn you play it too as a first strike lifelink 3/2. So I don't know. Maybe this thing has some legs. We'll see. All right. Next up, we've got Squall, which is 4 mana for 3/4, and it has whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gains double strike, and it deals common damage to a player. Return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. So I feel like if you gave this thing itself trample, haste, and additional power, for example, from the siege. Yes, I know this is 4 colors. There is a land that's actually going to enable, I think, 4 color or 3 color aggro decks much easier. But let's just say you did that. It itself would get double strike and hit for 8, and then you could return 2 things. It seems pretty cool. Um, Maybe pretty sweet also with like the Rot Cursed Rakshasa. Uh, like a week or so ago, I made a Rot Cursed Rakshasa double strike deck, and I think this card would be a good addition to that if you're playing white in that sort of strategy. But giving that double strike, and then also if it deals combo damage, you could return the Rot Cursed Rakshasa back to play. I mean, you could play this in like Oculus, maybe, because it can return Oculus. I don't know. 4 mana might be just too much for these abilities that aren't quite that great. Giving double strike is decent, and returning stuff is good, but you do have to hit them. So I don't know. The jury is still out on this one. I could see it seeing no play. I could see it maybe finding a niche and seeing some play in standard. Okay, next up, this card is sweet. One of my favorite cards of the set, I would say. 3 mana for a 3/5. Yuna, Hope of Spira. Human cleric. During your turn, it and enchantment creatures you control have trample, lifelink, and ward 2. And at the beginning of your end step, return up to 1 target enchantment card from your battlefield with a finality counter on it. So basically, every turn during your end step, you get to return an enchantment, which is pretty powerful. You could play it with like cheaper enchantments and just get those back. But I was trying to think what are the big cheap stuff or big expensive stuff you can cheat into play, like Omniscience or even the new Summon here. Both of those would be pretty good, and if you could get like 2 things back, even that would be pretty good. It also protects itself because it has War 2, so it makes it harder to kill if your opponent has like removal up, which is pretty good as well. And it gives again other enchantment creatures, any other enchantment creatures. There are quite a few, and Duskmourn that were useful. So maybe you're playing this in more of like a low to the ground enchantment deck. This card could be pretty good there as well, giving them lifelink, trample, and ward. So, yeah, this card seems cool. I'm mostly probably using it to try to cheat in huge things, but I could see uses in different sort of strategies. Okay, lastly, I've got a collection of cards that I couldn't really figure out what to do with. Um, and I don't know, they just it seemed like kind of underpowered or just didn't have great synergy. The Darkness Crystal, 4 mana, makes black spells cost less, and then if a non-token creature would die, it exiles, so you gain life, and then you can get a creature back for 6 mana. Seems kind of expensive to doing what it's doing, and like 4 mana to ramp for 1 is like not that great. So I don't know. It doesn't seem that powerful to me. There are going to be like a cycle of crystals, I believe. So maybe the other ones will be better. This one's just kind of meh. Um, Noctis, also kind of a cool card. 4/3 lifelink, and you can cast artifact spells from your graveyard by paying 3 life. So this card I could see maybe seeing some play in an artifact deck. But it does the excuse me, the artifact comes into play with a finality counter on it, so you can't like loop artifacts over and over again by paying 3 life. So that kind of makes it less exciting to me as sort of a combo enabler. But maybe in some sort of artifact aggro deck, you just want to get your artifacts back. But again, you have to kind of pay the other costs of it of their artifacts. So this you could pay 4 mana. This just dies to like lightning strike, and then you're kind of sad that you paid 4 mana for this. So I don't know. Doesn't seem great. And then Zodiark, Umbral God, 5 mana, maybe in a Black Devotion deck. This could be okay, but it's a 5/5 indestructible god. When it enters, each player sacrifices half the non-god creatures they control of their choice rounded down. Rounded down. If it has rounded up, it actually could be okay. And then when a player sacrifices another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This doesn't seem that great for 5 mana. Not really doing enough or having that big of an impact, especially the rounded down part. So I don't know. And then let's see. A couple more cards I couldn't quite think were that great. Summon Leviathan, kind of interesting. 6 mana for a 6/6 ward against another Saga creature. Return each creature that isn't a Kraken, Leviathan, Merfolk, Octopus, or Serpent to its owner's hand. So maybe in a Merfolk deck, this could be okay, but 6 mana is quite a lot for a Merfolk deck to get to. Until end of turn, whenever Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, Merfolk, Octopus, or Serpent attacks, you draw a card. So you can draw a few cards, you can bounce everything, and it dies. It just seems like it doesn't do enough for 6 mana. And you could like reanimate it, I suppose, and get some value there, but it just doesn't. I just couldn't really see a great use for this thing. And then the Realm Reborn, kind of the same thing. Interesting card. 6 mana for other permanents you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color. Like you could do this, all the tokens, like food tokens, map tokens, things like that, have those tap for extra mana. All your enchantments. It does say other permanents, so itself doesn't tap for mana. But like enchantments or artifacts can tap for mana. Problem with this card though is that it costs 6 mana itself. So if you're already up to 6 mana, do you really need additional mana? Um, I don't know. Maybe there's some uses. I mean, this one of all the ones seems like it could be some cool, interesting combo. I just couldn't think of like why you would really want to have all your permanents tap for mana, or if there's some interesting combo that I'm not aware of with this. There are already cards that kind of let your food tokens tap for mana. I can't remember the name of it. So, and that card doesn't really see play. So, I don't know. Interesting card for sure, but doesn't seem like a great card once you get to 6 mana. You're probably just dead in standard by the time you play this. So, um, and then Sid, the Timeless Artificer, cool design. You can play any number of them. You can cycle for 2, and artifact creatures and heroes you control get +1/+1 for each artificer you control, and each artificer card in your graveyard. So, if you cycle a bunch of those, you can pump up your artifact creatures. But this just seems pretty clunky. Spending a lot of mana for not a great effect. And just a 4/4. It dies easily. So I don't know. If you can think of any interesting uses for Sid, let me know. Certainly, I don't think any of the like any number of cards have had cycling before, so that's kind of interesting. But yeah, those are sort of the collection of cards that I couldn't think of what to do with. And let me know if you have any ideas. Okay, and then last up, we've got some lands, which I thought were cool to mention. Adventure lands, and these are town lands as well, which I think could matter. Again, we'll have to see when the set fully gets spoiled how much being a town can matter. Um, and so the first one is Zedor, and it has adventure for 6 mana. Target opponent mills half their library rounded down, and it's a land that can come into play tap for blue. And then the green one is the sorcery for 6 mana. Again, create a 1/1 colorless hero and put a +1/+1 counter on it for each land you control. So you could get, assuming you have like 6 lands out, that would be a 7/7 creature with a lot of counters on it. So that could be interesting for like counter synergies, something like that. Otherwise, it's a force, comes in play tapped. Um, I was thinking about these. I was like, are you really going to play these instead of like a basic land? Maybe in like a control deck or like a ramp deck, like maybe the green one in like a green ramp deck you could. But coming to play tapped is a big downside for a land, and it only taps for 1 color. Doesn't fix your mana. It is a town again, so we'll have to see how relevant that is. But how many times are you going to actually play like hold this in your hand and not play it as a land and like miss your land drop? Like you probably would never do that, right? And like the upside of being able to adventure it versus the downside of it coming to play tapped. This feels like the downside of it coming to play tapped is, to me, when I'm evaluating these, greater than the upside of being able to adventure it. It's kind of interesting too. Like both of these, we'll see what the other ones if they're gonna. I'm assuming this is a cycle. Um, if they all cost 6 mana, 6 is a lot of mana to pay for an effect that doesn't really win you the game right away, which is a lot for standard. Although the mill one is interesting. There are some cards in older formats that like double your milling. Actually, there's that monument that doubles it too, but it doesn't. You have to pay additional mana to do that. Um, So that would be a very expensive combo. But you could play that in a mill deck, and that could be useful. But like, what percentage of the time are you paying 6 mana versus just playing this as a land? I don't know. And once you do kind of adventure it, um, then getting your like seventh or eighth land drop, how relevant is that? I don't know. After that, it's getting the kind of a 2-for-1. I'm not sure. So I'm not really sold on these. They don't seem that great. There is some interesting cards in standard, or maybe for some in older formats, that count the adventure cards that you have. For example, the Balloona, or also the Hearth Elemental, that count for cards that have adventure in it. So having lands that have adventure, I believe these are the first lands that have ever had adventure on it. So that could be interesting with adventure, the cards that have adventure on it, synergies. And maybe that's a reason to play these as well. But yeah, let me know what you think. Maybe am I under evaluating, over evaluating them? This don't seem that great to me. I've seen people be very excited about them, but they kind of seem like, would you really like, a forest is probably better most of the time, or an island is better than one of these. And then last up, these I am excited about these two cards. However, the starting town, which again is a town, it enters tapped unless it's your first, second, or third turn of the game, can tap for colorless, and then you can also pay life for any color. So that card is quite good, I think, especially obviously in aggressive decks where you want an untapped land on the first, second, or third turn of the game, and you want to have good mana. And it's pretty cool because you don't actually, like, compared to like City of Brass, you don't have to take damage off of this. If a card has a colorless cost, you can use that as well. Later in the game, it comes into play tapped, obviously, which isn't great. But if you're an aggressive deck, that's really not as important as getting a good start and being able to have really good mana. So I could really see the starting town seeing play in multiple formats, not just standard, and older formats, maybe Pioneer as well, just because it just seems very efficient in what it does. And then the Town Greeter, also pretty cool. 2 mana for 1/1, and when it enters, you mill 4, and you can put a land card from among them into your hand. And if you put a town card, so again, town cards could matter for the lands I just talked about, and also the starting town. And there's the one that comes into play that gives you 2 life. You gain 2 life if you put a town card. So maybe that is another reason to play more town cards. And we'll see if there are more incentives to play town card or lands in your deck in this set. Uh, so we'll see, and that would definitely jump up my evaluation of those other adventure lands for sure. But Town Greeter by itself is a pretty efficient mill card as well. So I could see this card seeing play. There's a card, Seder Wayfinder, I believe, that's does the same thing essentially, but doesn't give you the town bonus, and sees play in some mill strategies. So this is definitely a very efficient mill card. Gives you a body, gives you an extra card in your hand, mills quite a bit. So very efficient at what it does, and could see some play in some mill strategies. So that is it for what was spoiled over the weekend and on Friday. And there was a lot of cards. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I do apologize for mispronouncing almost every single card. But yeah, that is. Let me know in the comments below what you. Not sure why the thank you looks like that. What you think about this set? Any cool combos, strategies, synergies I missed? Love to hear about them. I'm still kind of digesting all the cards and figuring out what is good. And again, as the set gets revealed, we will definitely learn more and start brewing some decks. And then, of course, all the gameplay for those decks will be on this channel. Again, thanks so much for anyone who supported the channel by being a member, or just liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing the video. Really means a lot. And hope you are enjoying the set previews. I will be back. We'll see in the next couple of days how many previews we'll get. I'll try to do some more, cover all the cards that I think are worthy of covering, that have some cool combo synergy potential. Usually try to cover most of the rares and mythics in my reviews, and maybe even do a little bit of Pioneer on Arena coming up as well. And then, of course, gameplay with all the new Final Fantasy cards and sweet new combos that I can think of. So, and thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.